Hello, I'd like to welcome you all here to this webinar from Family and Life. Today here we are at Protect Life trying to break the consensus, and I am delighted to welcome tonight again a friend of ours on the video we've had before, Father Paddy McCafferty. We're seeing a lot less of you, Paddy, than we have done before. You're looking very well.
Yeah, thank God.
I have to say, I'm kind of curious to know how you did it myself. I mean, the process and the difficult process of having
very simple, very
very
simple. You know, nothing earth-shattering. Just get out walking, cut out the carbs. You know, that was it basically.
So we're here because you have, well, look, we like to talk to you anyway, but the specific reason we're talking to you tonight is because before the recent elections to the Assembly, you were quite vocal in your opinion, both in social media and I think also in homilies that you gave about the responsibilities of voters and of parties and political parties in the context of the upcoming election, specifically about the life issue. So first of all, could you give a bit of a context before the election of what the state of the parties was?
Yes, I would be quite friendly with Luke McCann, who was standing in South Belfast for Aontú. And Luke sometimes comes to Mass in our church here in the mornings. And on Easter Monday, it was unscripted, it was completely off the cuff. I had preached on the readings as I do every morning. And I had noticed Luke in the congregation. And I says, by the way, that young man down there is running for the election on the 5th. This was Easter Monday. And I says, you can vote for Aontú as a Catholic, but you can't vote for Sinn Féin or the SDLP or any of those other pro-abortion parties, but you can in good conscience vote for the likes of Luke. And it was unscripted. And but what happened was we have the parish webcam, of course, which we know people tune in on the webcam, and someone took a recording from the web, the recorded Mass of what I had said, and then it began to circulate. And sort of that it went kind of all over the place. And the next thing was, this was now Wednesday, Easter Wednesday, and I got a call from our diocese, the diocese, the press officer of the diocese, to say that the diocese were issuing a statement because the Irish News had picked up on it and were publishing it the next day. This would have been Easter Thursday. And they read me the statement. The statement was fine. We don't promote political parties, but we uphold. They reiterated the church's teaching on the sanctity of life and so on. The statement was fine, but the way it was spun by the Irish News the next day was that the church was distancing itself from me. Now our bishop was upset about that. He told me that he was upset by that headline. That was not what he was doing at all. In fact, okay, that we don't. I mean, I'm not interested in politics as such. I'm not behind any particular political party, but I am behind the innocent child in the womb. And anybody who will defend that child, I will stand with. DUP, whoever. Into we can, with a clear conscience, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. We can stand with someone if it comes to a choice, as it was in some parts of this city, between, for example, a pro-abortion SDLP candidate and a young Catholic devout man who believes in the sanctity of human life from the moment of conception. For me, it's a no-brainer who you vote for.
Do you think that a lot of people just found the idea shocking that Catholic priests from a nationalist background would be saying that you should vote for a group like the TUV or the DUP rather than the party of John Hume and Seamus Mallon, say, for example?
Yeah, I smiled earlier on the news where Claire Hanna, one of the MP for South Belfast, SDLP, when Carla Lockhart, who's another MLA for the DUP, was speaking in the Parliament today, and she mentioned John Hume, and Claire Hanna shouted across at her, take John Hume's name out of your mouth. She should take John Hume's name out of her own mouth. John Hume would be horrified at what the SDLP have degenerated into, and they have allowed that to happen. And Claire Hanna and Colm Eastwood and co all pleaded along with Sinn Féin, for Westminster to impose one of the most extreme abortion regimes in Europe on the north of Ireland without asking the people, impose it. They pleaded with Westminster. They all lined up behind the Labour MP Stella Creasy, who is militantly pro-abortion. And they all lined up behind her. The letter was published in the London Times, and their names are all there. And for her to say to Carla Lockhart, who would be pro-life, take John Hume's name out of your mouth, she has some cheek. She should take us. John Hume would disown that party today. They're not the party that we always voted for. Catholics in the north would have voted for. And I did say from the altar, vote DUP or TUV before you vote for Sinn Féin or the SDLP. Make no apology, and I made no apology.
There will have been, shall we say, just ordinary members of the SDLP or councillors, I don't know at the level of Westminster or the MLA, but possibly even there, who will have said, well, actually, yeah, I consider myself to be a member of the Catholic Church in good standing. I myself, personally, I am pro-life, and I don't think that you should be saying to Catholics that they should vote for parties that we think are actually actively hostile to Catholics and to Catholicism. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I had a call, a particularly vicious call from a very prominent person in the SDLP who attacked me and was shouting down the phone at me, basically, who did I think I was and stuff like that. And I just decided that I wasn't going to engage with that level of abuse, and I terminated the call. But what I would say to them is, I know for a fact that ordinary SDLP members pleaded with their party and the MLAs to not sign up, for example, to Claire Bailey's exclusion zone bill, which will make it as well. It's been thrown out, or it's been put on the it's being challenged, and the Attorney General has put it on hold. But she railroaded that through Stormont on the basis of lies. And it was the Belfast Health Trust that connived with her in those lies by making up figures that were pro-life people were supposedly harassing outside these abortion mills. And it was a lie. It was shown to be a lie. But they all lined up behind her, and ordinary party faithful, for want of a better term, who do value human life. And I know that there are people in the SDLP who value human life still. But what are they allowed to happen? And they pleaded with them not to support Claire Bailey's bill, and they all, to a man and woman, supported her bill. All the SDLP MLAs at Stormont sitting previously. 4 of them have lost their seats. And I am convinced, and I know for a fact that they lost their seats because of abortion, because of their stance on abortion. 2 of them in particular, or sorry, 1 of them in particular, who would masquerade as a Catholic. He voted to kill children up to birth in December past there. He voted, masquerading as a Catholic, that he signed up to killing Down syndrome children and little children with so-called defects up to birth. Now, how can anybody stand over that? How can any faithful Catholic, vote for someone like that? They lost 4 of their members, and and the media wouldn't say a word about it. And even in the commentators going on afterwards, it was the elephant in the room, the unborn child, and their stance, their betrayal. It's betrayal of faithful Catholics in the SDLP. The Sinn Féin are long gone that road. But the SDLP, I would have always voted SDLP since I got the vote in my adult life, but never again, never again.
But Paul, if I can ask you this, if we look in Ireland and we look in the United States, I mean, the President of the United States is an Irish Catholic, as it were. Lots of members of the Democratic Party there, and others who support access, what are now these days called abortion rights. We see it in Germany, we see Holland, France, Italy, wherever. Politicians. What would you just say to somebody that these people are Catholic, that what you're doing is in a sense going on a personal journey, personal. This is something you feel personally very strongly about. But obviously, this isn't church teaching. This isn't, because in a sense, we look across the world and there are lots of priests and bishops who don't seem to have a problem with these people present themselves at the altar rails to receive communion, and there isn't an issue. Is this not maybe Father Paddy McCafferty, who was a man of great conviction and compassion, but going on a solo run?
It is an unprecedented scandal in church history that these so-called Catholics like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi are allowed to receive the Eucharist, to desecrate the Eucharist every week. It's unprecedented in church history. JFK would never have done it, and he wouldn't have been allowed to do it. But what you have nowadays is utter confusion allowed to reign, where these ones will turn a blind eye and will actually excuse it. There are bishops, there are prelates in America, there's cardinals in America who will allow Joe Biden to make a mockery. It's not my personal run, it's the teaching of the church. It's what we believe as Catholics, that to kill a child, to deliberately kill a child is the sin of murder. And it cries out to heaven. It's such a grave sin. It's one of the sins that cries out to heaven. And to allow any so-called Catholic to masquerade and to even approach the altar in that way and to roll the red carpet out for them practically is unprecedented in the history of the church, because we always recognized what was evil. We always knew to go to Holy Communion, for even the Pope himself or for anybody, the priest that send the Mass at the altar, used to be in the state of grace. You must not be conscious of any grave sin, and you go to confession if you are, before you receive Holy Communion. But these ones who are promoting ideologies and evils that are irreconcilable with the Catholic faith are actually encouraged. It's shocking. It's damnable, and I mean damnable in every sense.
It is a very grave decision, isn't it, for a priest to have to make when somebody presents themselves for a Eucharist, to deny them that. So how do you go about making that decision? I mean, back when I was a chaplain in the Christian Brothers and we were in the Catechism and so, if somebody was living in public sin, we'll say, whatever, they were a public sinner, whatever that means, and they were known to be living in that state, then they couldn't have sinned. But it ultimately, it was also, well, a priest also cannot know the heart of the person. They can't know the state the state of the person that's in front of them. So it's a very difficult situation for you or for any priest.
Well, I have had occasion. I had a funeral here one time of a priest who died. He was very well known, Father Des Wilson, great man. And I was the main celebrant of his funeral mass. I wasn't, there were other priests on the altar with me, and two prominent politicians, pro-abortion, Sinn Féin politicians, were in the congregation. And both of them went to Holy Communion, and they didn't come to me. They didn't, because my public stance was clear even at that stage. This was a couple of years ago. But parishioner, I didn't see it. I could do nothing about it. I was giving Holy Communion in front where I normally would give it Mass, or other priests were giving communion at other stations, and they went to one of the other priests, and some of our parishioners were horrified, because we had just had the Eighth Amendment and all that went with it. So what I did afterwards, I wrote to both of them, and I told them under no circumstances ever again were they to approach the Eucharist in Corpus Christi Church. They would not be receiving it, and I would make sure that they wouldn't. And I explained why, and that's what we're advised to do. Cardinal Ratzinger wrote to the American bishops in 2004, and he said, take them aside, explain the position to them, and ask them not to present themselves. And if they persist in presenting themselves, the minister must refuse to administer the Blessed Sacrament to them. So those two have been warned. Over my dead body will I ever allow that desecration, that sacrilege to take place in the church here. I won't allow it. And and they know where I stand. I'm in the public domain about it several times. So they would know not to do it. and they haven't done it since, I have to say. And there have been here on occasions for other funerals, and they didn't present themselves, but they wouldn't have received if they presented themselves, you know.
So can you?
And see, these are public, Michael. These are public figures. Yes. It's not just a case of someone who's maybe, I don't know, who comes up and has a mortal side. I don't know that, but they have made a public declaration that is utterly contrary to the faith. And until they retract that public position and repent of it and seek reconciliation with God, they should not come to Holy Communion, and they should not receive Holy Communion.
So can you just, I'm curious to know what would, when this became viral, this became across social media and across the north and beyond. So just what was the reaction of say just ordinary parishioners, well, politicians, but also of your brother priests in the episcopacy?
Well, I have to say our parishioners here were very supportive. Those who come to Mass. Others were furious. I mean, our school principal told me there just during the week that we have First Communion coming soon, and a couple rang the school to complain about me, that if I said anything about abortion, they were going to walk out of the first. Not what I be saying about abortion at First Holy Communion for, but I mean, my response is keep walking. What are you doing with your child at a Catholic school? What are you doing bringing your child for First Communion? The faith obviously means nothing to you. The teaching of the church means nothing to you. So there was a furious reaction, Michael. I heard about I stayed away from the reaction, but I was told it was extremely vicious and filled with fury and venom. It was in the comment sections of different places and on the internet, Facebook, all that stuff. I just stayed away from it. But I did also get tremendous support and calls and letters and messages of support. And as you mentioned, that not long after that, a few weeks after it maybe, priests did begin to speak out. Not a whole lot, but some did. And I mean, it doesn't matter to me what they think of me. I know half of them probably think I'm mad. That's that, you know. So what? It's not what they think about me, but I'll not be answering to any of them. I'll not stand in front of them when it comes to giving an account of my stewardship to Christ at his judgment throne. And they will answer for. I said to the people here one day, it doesn't matter what other priests are saying. I'll not answer for what other priests are saying or not saying. I'll answer what I said. And I will not start. You'll not hear anything different from here except what the church teaches and what the word of God teaches and the truth. And you can't deviate from that. You can never deviate from that.
Is this tied up with what your understanding? You use the word stewardship. As a priest, you're a pastor.
Yeah.
You're acting in loco Christi as a shepherd.
Yeah.
Is that what a lot of this is? For instance, your sense that you have a duty to your parish, but also a personal duty that if you don't, that not quite, but you know the story of the talents, that when you come back and they ask you what you did.
Yes, up 100%, and even more seriously, where God said to Ezekiel, if I tell you to go to the wicked man to warn him to change his ways and you do not go, I will hold you accountable for his death. It's as serious as that. These bishops and priests and all the rest of them who will not take Joe Biden aside and Nancy Pelosi and say, look, what you're doing is completely contrary, and either stop, don't go to Holy Communion. I've got people in my congregation and they won't go to Holy Communion out of their respect for what the Holy Eucharist is, because they're living in a situation marriage-wise or something else, and they'd come up for a blessing. And here's a man and others who promote evil and the slaughter of innocents, and they walk up and, as Biden put it, take communion. And this is very serious, if Pope Francis said to him in that audience there a few weeks or months ago, whatever it was, that he was, as Biden has come out saying, and I heard it with my own ears, that the Pope said, I'm a good Catholic and keep taking communion. If the Pope said that to him, he's wrong. The Pope is wrong. He's not a good Catholic and he shouldn't be receiving Holy Communion until he repents and changes his ways. No, you reason with them, you say, look, if you do that, they should be excommunicated, Michael. Biden and Pelosi should be excommunicated. It's as far as I'm concerned, it's as simple as that. What they're doing is shocking, and it's a scandal to the whole world, and it makes an absolute mockery of what our Catholic faith means and what the Eucharist is.
It just strikes me that can they be taking Eucharist that seriously? If I go to Mass, if I go to a funeral, I go to a wedding, I go with my family to an affair, because I am, shall we say, I'm these days more a fan than a follower in the church. I'm myself in the church. So I would never go to the altar, because if nothing else, I respect the understanding and the belief of the people around me.
Yeah.
And I am not in communion.
No.
My understanding, and it seems a terribly disrespectful thing to do. I remember having a conversation with, and you remember from your days, Vincent Toomey. We're talking about a similar subject to this, and I mentioned the mother of an Anglican friend of mine, and the discussion was about the nature of what you consubstantiation, transubstantiation, all that. And she said, and her comment was, "I don't know what it is, but I know it's the most important thing in the world." And you know, if you're going to scholastic definitions, I think from a Christian point of view, that mightn't be a bad way to go about it. And it seems to me, if it is for someone who's an Anglican or Catholic or a Lutheran, with the attitude to Eucharist that they have, it's a very disrespectful thing to do.
I believe it's diabolical in the true sense of the word, this disrespect for the most sacred, the holiest of all that is holy, and that they just, it's diabolical, you know, and it's an attack upon the very heart and core of what the church is, and it's being permitted, and it's being excused and reasoned for, etc., by men who will have the responsibility before God and who will answer for it before God when they leave this world.
Did you get any sense of surprise from people, say, within the TUV or the DUP community, that there was a Catholic? They were saying, "Have you heard there's a Catholic priest above in Belfast saying that they should vote for the TUV or for the DUP? What's going on there?"
Yeah, well, I didn't. Maybe there was, but I didn't hear about it. I mean, as I said, I stayed out of the affray, and I got messages and calls and letters from faithful Catholics who were very supportive, and who listened to me, who said they were going to listen to me and they were going to do what I advised them to do. And but I didn't hear anything from the DUP or the TUV or anything like that, and I wasn't interested in hearing anything from them or whatever about them. I just stepped. I preached in the church, and I went back to try to see the Irish News were being mischievous. And I've had problems with the Irish News anyway, and I stopped. And in the beginning of this year, I decided that I would unsubscribe, that I would no longer read that paper and I would no longer support it, because they were censoring letters that I wrote to them about abortion, particularly about abortion. If I wrote the word "kill" in relation to the child, they would change it to "terminate," another silly beggar stuff, you know. So I decided that I was having nothing more to do with that paper, and they deliberately, they slanted their headline that I was being distanced from, and they thought that would maybe shut me up, that I was going. And I actually had a call then from the Sunday World or one of them other papers, that I had been reprimanded, that the bishop had reprimanded me. But there's no such thing, that there's absolutely not. Far from it. The bishops came out. They were going to come out anyway, I know or believe, but they came out very strongly themselves. And I went back to that subject several times in the run-up to the election in the church, hammer and tongs. I got stronger and stronger about it. They did not succeed. If they were thinking that it would shut me up and that I would put my head down and all that, they were sorely mistaken. I went after it, hammer and tongs.
What did they expect to see? A reed bending in the wind?
Well, yeah. But now I have to. I will say, I'm not made of Teflon, and it isn't nice when you know you're the object. And it was of pure hatred. In some cases, it was vicious hatred. You're dealing with evil. When you're dealing with abortion, you're dealing with the demonic. It's you only had to look the other week when that was leaked in America, that the Roe versus Wade could be overturned or whatever. The fury and the viciousness of the abortionists outside Catholic churches, people having to make human chains around the doors of the church to stop them, and threatening to burn the Blessed Sacrament, and they stole a tabernacle out of a church in Texas, and horrendous stuff. You're dealing with the demonic, because you're dealing with the ripping apart of a little child for whom God has a plan. God has a plan and a destiny for that little child, and it is torn limb from limb for so-called choice. You know, it's diabolical, and you're dealing with the demonic, and there's no surprise that the greatest object of their fury and hatred would be the Eucharist, the Mass, and to sow complete confusion among the faithful as to when they watch a pro-abortionist, a fake Catholic, going up to receive the Eucharist on a Sunday and being permitted, and being all that goes with that. You know, it's unprecedented in the history of the church.
So the results came out into, not that you, I don't want to say that you were endorsing them, but rather you were saying that if you're a nationalist, this is a party you can vote for in good conscience. But if you don't vote for it, then you can vote for the DUP or the TVU. These are the parties that have a straight down the line pro-life. And if you're a faithful Catholic and you want to vote, this is the limit of choices.
It's a no-brainer, as I said.
So the results came out. They got, I think, it was around 1.5% percent first preference votes. As TV, DUP, we can't work out what vote was there, but maybe there was some. Were you disappointed? Were they disappointed? What was your reaction to the vote?
I mean, it was what I expected. I mean, it would have been a miracle otherwise, but they're a small party, they're a new party, and somebody said to me that it takes about 10 years to grow a new party. And the Alliance would have been like them in the past. You look at them now, you know. No, I don't. Pater Tobin, the day the results were all coming out, I saw where he tweeted that over 50% of the SDLP's lost votes went to Into.
Okay.
Over 50% of their lost votes, and 4 of them lost their seats on abortion. And I mean, I'm not disappointed, and they're actually quite happy that they think they did quite well. And some of the one or two commentators were saying they should feel well enough that they did okay for a new party, and they will definitely take seats in the council elections when they come. So you know, it is what it is, and you know, I had to do what I felt was my duty as a preacher and as a priest, a pastor of the people, to warn them, to tell them, this is, you know, don't go near that crowd. The blood of innocents on their hands. I know there's other issues, and many issues. Of course. But when you promote that evil, those issues are polluted. They're polluted by the deaths of children. That's what we're talking about all the time. It's a little child that's been killed. It's not a clump of cells and that vile nonsense. We're all clumps of cells, but we're created in God's image and likeness. And you know, so yeah, it wasn't an easy time the last few months or whatever it was since Easter. It wasn't easy, and I did at times feel a bit shaken, and I'll admit that. But I couldn't get into that. The scriptures that were coming up all the time at Mass and on the Sundays and everything in the daily Mass were really telling you, like the apostles in the beginning were you know, terrified, and then the Holy Spirit came to them and they went out, and I love today where Paul was taken outside. They stoned him and they thought it killed him. They dragged him outside the town and they dumped his body. And what did he do when he regained consciousness? He got up and he went straight back into the town. They didn't intimidate him. In
the run up to the referendum here, I wrote a series of articles for the magazine, which is published by the hierarchy for priests. I can't remember.
Intercom. Yeah.
And my basic, I suppose, theme was that one of the challenges for priests, or not just priests, but Catholics generally, to take themselves seriously, to take their belief seriously, and that at times there is, I don't want to be overly judgmental, but within the shall we say, the presbyterate, a recognition that yes, this is what we believe, but you have to work that out. They have to work that out in life, and that if this is what you believe, then that belief should have consequences for how how you act and what you say. And there seems to be a reticence to go from that point of this, I believe,
Yeah.
to the next point. And I can understand that maybe a desire to be compassionate, not to be hard or judgmental, is part of the underlying. Maybe a sense these days, a lot of priests, I think, lack confidence because of the abuse crisis, which you've spoken about. And I don't understand all that. But do you not think that part of that is that there's an inability or refusal to take themselves seriously?
Very much so. And I mean, we will always respond with compassion and love and care, even to a woman who's had an abortion. Always. I've never in my priestly life, and thank God I've had the privilege of helping and reconciling and comforting women who had found themselves in the position and maybe, you know, they went along with that act. And we never respond to them with anything other than compassion and love. And I think you're 100% right. Priests have taken a terrible battering, and they are afraid to raise their heads above the parapet for all sorts of reasons. It's not nice to put your head above the parapet. It's not something that you enjoy. I don't enjoy it. By no means do I enjoy it. But there comes a time when you must. And as regards the abuse crisis, well, I suffered personally from an abusive priest. I was his victim, and we put him, me and his other victims, put him in jail 10 years ago. So I know, I've been there. I know what all that's about. But at the end of the day, you must stand up to preach the gospel. That's your solemn undertaking. When you were ordained, and one of the vows was to preach the gospel, to teach the Catholic faith, and you know, with wisdom, with responsibility. You are responsible before God. He will, as it says, I will require my flock at your hand, and he will hold us answerable for what we did, what we didn't do, and what we did do. You know, we will account for that, and we have to be aware of that. And not as it was Feast of St. Catherine of Siena there just recently, the end of April, and it was in the middle of that storm. It was raging, and someone sent me a little quote: "Proclaim the truth and do not be silenced by fear." Do not be silenced by fear, because you can be silenced by fear. I told the people here once, I am often afraid, you know, and I knew that I had to take an abuser to court and stand up in a court. I was terrified, I was petrified, but I did it. I had to do it because there was others who were hurt, and I had to stand with them. And it's the same in this issue. The most vulnerable of all, the defenseless, the most defenseless of all, and it's their slaughter is being normalized in the world. It's been normalized. It's been called a human right. It's been called healthcare. It's not healthcare is when your mommy has cancer and they make her pain go away, or when you're sick and you go to the doctor and they help you. That's healthcare. Abortion is the opposite of healthcare. It's you know, but they twist words. They change the meaning of words. That's what they do. They introduce compassion. We have to be compassionate to women. It's the most twisted and perverse that you can get in human nature when they start doing that and making it a human right. John Hume would be horrified, as I said earlier, at what the SDLP have degenerated into.
But as we go forward, I think we maybe have to look back, and some uncomfortable questions we need to ask. If we look both in the north and even more in the south, the large proportion of the people who voted in these situations will have gone through what we call Catholic schools, Catholic primary schools, Catholic secondary schools, where they're supposed to be exposed to a Catholic ethos, whatever that might mean. They certainly will have been exposed. In theory, they were catechized, and yet I don't know if if you've ever seen the Godfather 3, but there's a scene where the Godfather is talking to this holy cardinal who breaks this stone which he takes out of a fountain, which is wet on the outside, and he breaks it on the side, and he said inside it's dry. And he said, this is the heart, this is what men are, that the Christ has washed over them, but it stayed on the outside, it hasn't gone in. It's hard not to feel that there has been in some way a failure of catechism. I'm not saying that we should be, that the church's job is to to propagandize or to be like mind control or something. But surely, if there was real catechesis, there was real education from a real Catholic. There are great Catholic philosophers, great Catholic theologians, great thinkers for the last 2,000 years, and they don't see this. How do you feel about this?
There has been a catastrophic failure in catechesis for many, many years. It's catastrophic. It has not communicated the very basics of the Catholic faith. You're absolutely right. That analogy is very, very good. Christ has washed over them. He has not touched their hearts. He has not come into their lives. He has not changed their hearts. He has not converted them. They don't love him, basically. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. It's as you have to be a fire. Catherine of Siena, be what you're called to create it to be, and you'll set the world on fire. And that has failed. There's damp squibs everywhere. People going through the motions and going into school and getting in one ear and out the other, and going out and doing the very opposite of what they should be doing. And you're absolutely right. The fact that over 60% or whatever it was of the Catholic population in the 26 counties all voted, as a former president said, with a heart and a half for the killing of children, the unborn child, that speaks volumes. That has to be looked at. That's another day's work, as they say. But that's something that bishops need to sit down with, and priests need to sit down with. What happened? What happened? And what can we do about it? And, there's a great word in the Protestant tradition, revival. We need revival in the Catholic Church. We need people who will be brought into a living relationship with God, with Christ, be filled with the Holy Spirit, and that will. And it doesn't need to be many. I mean, I often say here that that God will always preserve a faithful remnant. He is always preserved. In the days of Elijah, he was the only one left. All Israel had gone apostate, and Jezebel and her weak wimp of a husband, they were promoting the worship of Baal, and part of that worship, interestingly, was child sacrifice. And all of Israel had departed, and Elijah was in fear of his life. God sent him back into the affray, and he took on the false prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, and he destroyed them and he scattered them. So we need that zeal. I've been on, as he said, I have been on full of zeal for the Lord God of hosts. We need to get some zeal. We need zeal for God, for his truth, unafraid, unashamed, standing up and not being in any way intimidated by the shrill, loud, wicked voices that would try to shout you down, will try to shut you up and try to intimidate you into silence. And I saw some of the stuff because it was sent to me personally, and you're part of a paedophile empire was one particularly nice comment. Yes. You're part of a paedophile empire. Who were you to say anything about abortion? But you can't be intimidated by that nonsense. You have to stand up to that rubbish,
Back when we were young, the word that was very much in vogue was metanoia.
Metanoia, yeah, exactly.
The change of the heart.
Yeah, it's actually a whole new way of conversion, a whole new way of thinking. There's two words, meta and noia. It's Greek, and it's literally new thought, new thinking. Like the alcoholics talk about stinking thinking. How the twistedness of your thoughts bring you back down and all the time down. And it's a renewal. It's a reform of the heart, a change of different heart. I will give you a new heart. And that's what's needed. That's what's wrong. There has been no new heart, and there has been no conversion, and there has been no real effective communication of the fire of the gospel, the fire of the gospel.
So just once, there's one little thing I just share with the listeners and yourself, that indicative that you small beginnings, perhaps. I'm not sure if it was the last seat or the second, one of the last seats to be filled in the election. There were a couple of 100 votes separating a DUP and a UUP candidate, and the votes that had been distributed were the AIM2 votes. Not many, get 350 or something like that. And the Aim2 votes transferred very heavily, and I think a lot of people surprised, to the DUP candidate. And it looks very like, that was a pro-life vote breaking, and the DUP candidate was elected. And so that was actually a seat that was filled for the matter of a few hundred votes. A few hundred people actually made that difference to return a pro-life as opposed to a pro-abortion candidate. So it doesn't, at the beginning at least, I mean, well, a few people can make a difference.
The Pro-Abortion Alliance Party and other, like the People Before Profit and Green Party, they all talk about moving beyond orange and green politics. The issue of life and the sanctity of life unites orange and green. People, it would have been unthinkable a number of years ago that a nationalist party like Aim2 would have allowed, their votes would have gone to the likes of the DUP. You know, that would have been unthinkable. It'd be unthinkable for me to vote number 2, number 3, DUP and TUV. Not because of their politics. I have no time for their politics. And I know what they say about Catholics. I'm well aware of it, but I can live with that. But what I cannot live with is someone who will promote the murder of babies. I can stand with anybody who will oppose that. I know I can take them on their anti-Catholic rubbish that they go on with, and I can challenge them on that, and I can argue with them on that. But I cannot. I will stand with them if they will oppose the evil of abortion. I'll stand with anybody who opposes that.
And I know you can take them on because I've seen and heard you do it, and it's a sight to behold. Paddy McCafferty, Father Paddy McCafferty, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight very much. I'd like to thank the viewers that have been with us today. We will be back soon. Before we go, I'd just like to bring you down the button. There's a subscribe button. You click on that, you'll be made aware of any new material that is coming up. There's also a donate button there. Fight goes on. With COVID, obviously, we haven't been able to have the meeting we would like to, so we're getting by, but just about. So anything you can give, we can promise you will be used as best we can to defend those life values that we all share. So again, Paddy, I'd like to thank you, and hopefully we will see you again sometime soon.
Thank you, Michael. God bless. Thank you. Take care.